it's Laurel Ann, and it's September wrap-up time. I read a lot of books last month. This month I'm not doing so well. It's the 15th right now, and yeah, I've read I don't think I've finished any books actually, which is a little bit sad. Anyway, enough of this song and dance. Let's get started. The first book I finished in September was The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner. This is about a young woman and former sex worker named Romy as she arrives in prison at the beginning of a double life sentence. The book follows her over the weeks, months, years after she gets to prison as she kind of adjusts to life there, and then sort of the stretching monotony of life in prison. The book is also interspersed with scenes from her past, including her childhood, her trial, and eventually actually we do see the crime that she commits. The book also spends time with other people in the prison, both prisoners that Romy meets and some other folks, there's a teacher who teaches a GED class, and we get to know him a bit, both in his work and outside, and we see their backstories as well. There are a lot of characters in this book, but they're all so real and written with so much compassion. To be honest, I was actually pretty hesitant about this book going in because I kind of thought that it might be sort of like misfortune porn. I'd heard from some other reviews that it was just brutal, and that's not really what I'm interested in, but I really ended up liking it very much more than I expected. It really just feels so real, and I did a little bit of reading about Rachel Kushner, and apparently she spent years going to prisons and getting to know the people who are incarcerated there, and I think that time and care and research really paid off in this book. I also think it's a great story to pick up in this current time. If you are someone who has just begun to become skeptical of our justice system, or are learning more and more about prison abolition and the prison industrial complex, and basically the injustice and the horror of the American prison system, and it's the same as in other places as well. Hi. Sorry, got distracted by a cat. If any of that applies to you, I think that this book will really resonate with you and really affect you. It is fiction, obviously, but I do think it does a really good job of illustrating how our current justice system fails so many people. I read a really good piece in the New Yorker about Rachel Kushner and this book in particular that came out right around the same time as the novel. And it said this thing that I want to read to you. In Kushner's view, the value of fiction is its ability to wrap reality in a mythical envelope, a shroud of meaning-making that can produce stories that are truer than truth. And if that is Rachel Kushner's goal when she writes, I think that this book really succeeds. Alright, then the second book I read was I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid. I hardly feel like I need to summarize this because everyone has been reading it this year, but just briefly, this centers on a woman as she is on a short road trip to visit her new boyfriend's family for the first time. And it's not long before shit gets kind of weird. I picked this up because a lot of people had been recommending it, and I also was interested in the film that came out last month. And I was just, it was early September, it was starting to get crisp outside, and I was like, hell yeah, get me some spooky stuff, I want to get freaked out. And there was an image very early on when the protagonist, she's never named, is looking back on this moment from her childhood when there was a man standing outside her window, and that really freaked me out. I was home alone, and just the way it was written was so unsettling that, my heart was racing, and it made me really excited for this book because I was like, if you are freaking me out this early, the rest is gonna do gangbusters for me. Is that how you use that word? I don't even know what that means. Anyway, and I will say that the general atmosphere throughout this book is very unsettling, and that's its biggest strength, I think, and that never really falters or falls off. I think he's done a really great job of maintaining that throughout. Unfortunately, there's a twist at the end that personally I don't think really works. I mean, it's certainly surprising. I can't say that I guessed that that was gonna happen, but I just don't think it was set up very well, and it also is a cliche that I've seen done before, not just once. And so if you're going to do this particular brand of twist, I want you to do something really special with it, and I don't know that this book did. I felt like the twist was in there just for the sake of having a twist, and I don't know, it didn't seem to me like that was the story he wanted to tell when he started writing this book. And in that regard, I actually think the film did a much better job. The movie is a completely different thing. It's not the same. It kind of drops that like atmosphere, descriptive words, and it instead, I think, picks out some themes that are sort of hinted at, and I think the film really teased those out and made it about that. The film is definitely not for everyone, and I think it's especially not for huge fans of the book. It's just a surreal piece of work. I mean, you guys, it's Charlie Kaufman. Like, this is what he does. But I just think that it made the whole thing about the ending, and it pulled it together into something that was a bit more meaningful. Whereas the way the book ends, for me, just felt kind of like, surprise, and it just did not satisfy me. I'll say that. Still, it's worth the read, I'd say. Our next book is Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton, and this is a memoir basically just about Dolly Alderton's 20s. It's framed as like all the lessons that she's learned about different things during her 20s. I heard Dolly Alderton interviewed on How to Fail with Elizabeth Day like a year ago whenever I was first getting into that podcast, and she really impressed me. I thought she was so interesting, so well spoken. The way she reflected on her failures was very, what's the word I want? Reassuring to me. That was shortly after this book came out that she appeared on the podcast, and so I put it on my TBR. And I had pretty high expectations because of the way she came across in that interview, but it just, yeah, the book didn't really live up to them. I think this is the kind of memoir that really just hangs everything on being relatable, and I didn't find it that relatable, so it didn't work. Dolly comes off as kind of immature, I'm sorry to say, in this book. Not in terms of her writing. I think her writing's good. But just the way she describes her younger self, like, obviously she was young and immature, and that's the time that she's writing about in this book. But even her, like, older self looking back feels immature. Like, there's this whole, like, I swear, it's gotta be a third of the book where she's just telling all these, like, crazy stories about getting so drunk and just having a wild old time. And the way she writes about them, even though she's like, yes, I was a pain in the ass, and I was disruptive to everyone around me, and I made terrible choices, she still uses this, like, reverent tone where it's like, yeah, this was really silly, but also it was like really cool. As someone who had a party girl phase, I just can't imagine looking back on those times in my life the way she does, and maybe that just means that I have too much self-loathing and she's more enlightened than me. I don't know. There was this really nice theme that ran through the whole memoir about how platonic love, particularly between gal pals, can be just as supportive and fulfilling as romantic love. And I did really like that. And then just when I thought it was ending on that lovely note, she turns around and she's like, just kidding, there's another chapter and it's about how turning 30 is terrible. You're gonna feel bad, you're gonna feel anxious, and every woman will feel like this no matter what. I'm a woke feminist and I felt like that, so you're definitely gonna feel this. I do know that our society has done a really great job of reinforcing this anxiety, and that is a lot of women's truth. And she probably thought that including this and then saying, but you know, now I'm in my 30s and it's fine, I feel good. She probably thought that would be really helpful to a lot of people. But like, if I'm being honest, I feel like I've just heard this story from so many able-bodied, beautiful, thin, white women, that like, it just did nothing for me, and I really think that that chapter should have been cut. I know I sound like I really hated this book, and I didn't. Like, it was light and fun. I enjoyed listening to it. I don't think we need to publish any more of this type of memoir. I just want to put this out there. If I criticize a memoir, I'm not really criticizing that person or their life. I'm just saying that I didn't particularly connect with this book or think it was the greatest piece of literature of all time. Cool. Next, I just want to speak briefly about The Warlow Experiment by Alix Nathan. This is historical fiction about a man who agrees to be the subject of an experiment where he is basically locked in like a luxury basement for 7 years without any human contact. And this experiment is being carried out by like kind of an eccentric rich guy who has dreams of being a scientist. And this premise is actually based on a real life advertisement that ran in a newspaper in like Georgian times in Wales, I think. I picked this up also for the spooky vibes. I thought that it was going to be like John Burnside's The Dumb House, which I loved, but it wasn't. It focused a lot more on the characters around this scenario, like the guy's wife and some of the servants in the house and their interpersonal relationships, and that's not bad, it's just not what I wanted for this book. So I DNF'd it, but I am including it here because I think it's a very interesting concept and it might speak to some people. So if this sounds interesting to you, I can't really discourage you from picking it up. It's written well, and it's got a really pretty cover, which is the main reason why we read books. Next, I read Bias by Jennifer Eberhart, which was good, but I don't feel like talking about it for some reason. Okay, get in the headspace. We're gonna keep going. I've already been recording for like 25 minutes and I just don't want to do it anymore. Okay. Bam, bam. The next book I read was Biased by Jennifer Eberhart. This basically aggregates the results of a lot of studies that have been done over the years that kind of show both the like neurological evidence for and results of bias. Primarily racial is what we're looking at here, but it does touch a bit on like gender and stuff like that. It's also interspersed with anecdotes by Eberhart of her being the victim of bias and also being biased herself. This book is very good. Someone's at the door? Okay. It was just the lawn guy, which we have one because we're middle class cliches. So, biased. Yes. I don't know how much like totally new information I got from this in terms of like what bias looks like and how it affects people from minority groups, but it's really great to read and know about a lot of actual peer-reviewed studies that prove and explain these things. I think especially if you're having a lot of conversations about race right now. Sorry if the camera just moved. I bumped it with my foot. I think that this book could be a really good recommendation for anyone who is just starting out on their journey toward becoming anti-racist or aspiring to be anti-racist, or just generally wanting to learn more about this stuff. Because it lays out a lot of really useful information in a way that's totally non-accusatory. Jennifer Eberhart has a very patient and saintly tone for most of this book. Somebody I know, don't want to out anybody, somebody I know is starting to become more interested and become more open to the idea that racism is something that we need to be working on. And every time they read an article or something, they come away well, yeah, it's really bad that Black people have these experiences, but also, why does this article have to say that all white people are evil? And it's well, it doesn't say that. It's just not saying, not gently patting you on the back and saying, don't worry. You know what I'm saying? This book, I think, would be a good, guiding hand at the start of that road. It's also super accessible, so yeah, good one. Check it out maybe if you want. Next, I want to talk about Summer by Ali Smith. This is the fourth and final book in the seasonal quartet that she's been rolling out over the last 4 years. And this was probably my most anticipated book of the year. So luckily, not so much luckily, but good for me, it was great. As I've said before, these books are kind of hard to explain because if I just describe the plot, it's not really telling you what the experience of reading this book is like because the plot isn't that important. But I will tell you anyway that this is about two teenagers named Sasha and Robert, whose parents basically broke up over the Brexit vote. Their mom voted leave, their dad voted remain. And it's now, 4 years out from there, and Sasha and Robert live with their mother, but their father and his new girlfriend live next door, which is just kind of a funny situation. Sasha is about 15, I think, and she is kind of your typical Zoomer TikTok teen. She's all into fighting climate change, she's vegan, she's on this protesty thing where she refuses to ride in any cars or buses or anything that uses fossil fuels. Meanwhile, Robert has kind of gone in an opposite direction where he's been getting into a lot of kind of alt-right kind of ideology, spending a lot of time on the chans. He's been getting in trouble at school a lot for saying really inflammatory things. And while it does seem like a lot of this is mainly just to get a rise out of people, there are parts of that ideology that are resonating with him, and he could be going off in a pretty dangerous direction. But their lives are kind of changed when they have a chance encounter with a pair of bloggers? They're bloggers, journalists, who maintain a blog about the climate and nature and climate change. And they take Sasha, Robert, and their mother on a little road trip. I honestly had so much fun with this, as always. The first half of this book is probably the funniest of the quartet. Sasha and Robert's mother is such an infuriatingly hilarious character. It's I kind of want to punch you in the face, but also you're endearing yourself to me. This one also brought characters back from the other seasonal books, which is the first time this has happened, and that just really gave me the warm fuzzies. Unfortunately, I didn't enjoy the last, probably third, quite as much because it's about being in COVID-19 lockdown, and it was just a little bit too real, and I'm not reading books right now to read about the situation I'm in right now. But that's not her fault. This is the kind of what she signed up for when she started this project. Anyway, yeah, I don't think it's my favorite right now, but maybe if I read it in a few years, I'll be able to think of it a little differently. I still very much recommend this series for fans of literary fiction. If you don't like literary fiction, or you only kind of like literary fiction, skip it. But if you are a big literary fiction fan, yeah, Allie Smith, she's your girl. Then I read Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. This is about a boarding school for kids that go to other worlds, which I always found to be a very intriguing idea, because this is something that's always been in my brain as a fan, as a child of the Narnia books. I was always like, wow, that would really be a disturbing experience to go to Narnia and grow up for 15 years and then suddenly have to be 7 years old again and start over. Wow, that sucks. So yeah, that's why I read this book. Very intriguing to me. Good idea. But I don't know. It was okay. It kind of reads like a TV pilot to me, where it's like, okay, the main point of this is to get everyone introduced and give you a feel for the place, and we'll throw in a basic 3-beat plot to move the story forward. And I think that comes partially from this just being a novella. It's so short, and to create like a whole massive fantasy universe with like dozens of fantasy universes baked in, a novella is a bold choice to make for that. And to be fair, maybe the rest of them are better. We all know that pilots tend to be the worst episodes of TV shows, except for Glee, in which case it was the only good episode. But if this were a TV show, I wouldn't keep watching, so I probably won't keep reading, unfortunately. I also found it weirdly overwritten. But that's just me. Sorry, Seanan McGuire. Just maybe not for me. Then I reread Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Erin Hicks. Not gonna go too much into this. Cute graphic novel, fall, autumn, food, happy, nice, cool. And the last book, at last, was Uncanny Valley by Wiener. This is another memoir. This one's about Wiener leaving the publishing industry at 25 and moving to San Francisco to work for a data analytics startup. I talked a lot about this in my vlog, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but I loved it. This gave me kind of everything that I wanted from the Dolly Alderton book, where it's very reflective and kind of both introspective and in a big picture kind of way. I don't think outrospective is a word, but if it is, that would be what it is. I really was not expecting to like it so much. Pretty much everyone who I've seen review it has given it 3 stars and said it was fine and repetitive. But I loved every minute of it. I loved her writing style. I liked her insights. I think if you, like me, like many of us, are feeling right now like you're at a crossroads, or you're not really sure where to go from this moment, this could be a really great book for you to read. Okay, that's all I've got for you today. I would love to know, what's the scariest book that you've read this autumn? Because I want to be scared, guys, and nothing is making me scared. And if you've watched it and you want to comment but you don't feel like thinking of actually writing a comment, I feel ya. Just pick a spooky emoji. Maybe the ghost. Is there a ghost? Maybe that spooky. You know what? You know what I want to see? I want to see that weird demon mask. Leave that emoji down in the comments. And then I'll know that you're my true friend who watched this video. And everyone else, you're canceled. Okay, thanks for watching. Please follow me on Twitter. I'm so lonely over there. That's all. Okay. Bye. Bam! It's a Charlie Durden. Look at you, you're so long. This is shit. This is why I don't read the books, because I still have more to talk about.